Imagine a boy of 17, wrapped in colors that would seal his fate. The sun burns over ancient Canaan, casting long shadows across fields where sheep graze and brothers harbor secrets darker than the desert night. His name echoes through millennia, whispered in the halls of power, sung in the songs of the enslaved, carved into the stone tablets of history itself. Joseph, a dreamer whose visions would reshape nations. A slave who would command empires, a forgotten son who would save the very brothers who betrayed him. But this is not the story you think you know. This is not the tale of divine favor wrapped in golden threads and easy miracles. This is the raw, unvarnished truth of a young man torn from everything he loved, thrust into a world that would break him or forge him into something unrecognizable. Picture him now, walking across sun-scorched earth toward his brothers, unaware that each step carries him closer to a pit that will swallow his childhood whole. He cannot see the caravan of merchants approaching from the east, their camels heavy with spices and chains. He cannot hear the silver coins already counting in his brother's hands, 20 pieces that will buy his freedom and sell his future. What transforms a favored son into a forgotten prisoner? What alchemy turns betrayal into blessing, slavery into sovereignty? How does a single dreamer's journey become the foundation upon which an entire nation will rise? Tonight you will witness the making of a legend. You will walk beside a boy as he becomes a man, follow a slave as he ascends to power, watch a dreamer as his impossible visions reshape the ancient world. This is the story of Joseph, but it is also your story. It is the story of every soul who has fallen into darkness and wondered if the light will ever come again. The colors of his coat may have faded, but the truth of his transformation burns eternal. The morning air in Hebron carries the scent of wild herbs and promise. Dew clings to the grass like diamonds scattered by an unseen hand, and the ancient oaks of Mamre stand as silent witnesses to the drama unfolding in Jacob's camp. This is the land of Abraham's wandering, Isaac's inheritance, Jacob's wrestling with the divine. Here, where heaven once touched earth through burning bushes and angelic visitations, a new chapter begins to write itself in the life of a shepherd boy. Joseph moves through this world with the unconscious grace of youth, unaware that he stands at the crossroads of destiny. At 17, he possesses that peculiar combination of innocence and intensity that marks those chosen for extraordinary journeys. His dark eyes hold depths that seem older than his years, as if he glimpses truths that hover just beyond the reach of ordinary sight. When he tends his father's flocks, there is something different in his manner, a quality that sets him apart from his brothers, like a single star burning brighter in a familiar constellation. The land itself seems to respond to his presence. Sheep follow his voice with unusual devotion, their bleating creating a gentle symphony across the hills of Canaan. Water springs seem clearer where he kneels to drink, and even the wild creatures of the field regard him with curious trust rather than fear. It is as if creation recognizes something in this young shepherd that he himself does not yet understand. A divine fingerprint pressed into the clay of his being before his birth. But Joseph is not merely a vessel for heavenly purposes. He is achingly, beautifully human. He laughs with the pure joy of one who has never known true hardship. his voice ringing across the valleys like silver bells in the wind. He runs through the fields with his younger brother Benjamin, their games echoing with the carefree abandon of boys who believe the world will always be kind to them. In these moments, watching them chase shadows and invent stories from the shapes of clouds, one can see the child he truly is beneath the weight of his father's expectations. Jacob's love for Joseph burns with an intensity that illuminates and destroys in equal measure. This is not the gentle affection of a father distributed equally among his sons, but rather a concentrated flame that warms one child while casting all others into shadow. The patriarch gazes upon Joseph with eyes that see not just a beloved son, but the living embodiment of his deepest love for Rachel, the wife whose beauty captured his heart and whose death left a wound that never fully healed. In Joseph's features, Jacob glimpses the face of his lost beloved, and in this recognition lies both blessing and curse. The famous coat arrives on an ordinary day that will echo through eternity. Jacob's weathered hands present the garment with trembling reverence, as if he offers not mere cloth but a crown, a scepter, a declaration written in threads of crimson and gold and deepest blue. The coat is magnificent beyond description, its colors shifting like sunset over water, its patterns telling stories of royal houses and divine favor. When Joseph slips it over his shoulders, something changes in the very air around him. He is no longer simply another of Jacob's sons, but someone set apart, marked, chosen. The fabric whispers against his skin with promises he cannot yet interpret. Each thread seems woven with destiny, each hue reflecting aspects of a future too vast for his young mind to comprehend. The coat fits him as if it were created specifically for his frame, as if the hands that crafted it knew the exact curve of his shoulders, the precise length of his arms. When he walks, it flows around him like liquid light, transforming a shepherd boy into something that resembles royalty. Yet even as Joseph revels in his father's gift, he cannot ignore the way his brothers' faces change when they see him approaching. Their smiles become forced, their conversations halt mid-sentence. Their eyes follow his movements with an intensity that makes his skin prickle with unease. He tries to tell himself it is merely jealousy, a passing storm that will clear once they adjust to this new reality. He is young enough to believe that love can conquer envy, that family bonds run deeper than resentment, that time will smooth the rough edges his father's favoritism has created. The brothers watch from a distance as Joseph tends his flocks, their silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. Reuben, the eldest, carries the weight of birthright and responsibility, yet he sees how their father's gaze passes over him to rest on Joseph with unmistakable preference. Simeon and Levi, fierce and protective, feel their warrior hearts burning with indignation at this public dismissal of their worth. Judah, natural leader among them, struggles to maintain peace in a household increasingly divided by favoritism and resentment. In the evening, when the family gathers around flickering fires to share the day's bread, the tension becomes almost visible. Joseph sits beside his father, the magnificent coat catching and reflecting the firelight until he seems to glow from within. Jacob's hand rests upon his shoulder with proprietary pride, and his voice carries special warmth when he addresses his favored son. The other brothers arrange themselves in a careful semicircle, their faces masks of polite attention that barely conceal the storms raging beneath. They remember their own childhoods, their own desperate attempts to win their father's approval, their own dreams of being chosen, cherished, celebrated. They recall moments when they brought Jacob their finest work, their greatest achievements, their most heartfelt offerings, only to watch his eyes search the horizon for Joseph's return. Each perceived slight has carved itself into their hearts like water wearing grooves in stone, creating channels where bitterness flows with increasing force. Joseph, wrapped in his coat of many colors and his father's unwavering affection, remains largely oblivious to the growing darkness in his brothers' hearts. He speaks to them with the easy familiarity of shared blood, unaware that each casual word, each unconscious assumption of privilege, each innocent display of his favored status adds fuel to fires that burn with increasing hunger in their souls. The stage is set for transformation. The players have taken their positions in a drama that will reshape not only their individual destinies, but the very foundation of a nation yet to be born. Joseph stands at the center of it all, young and beautiful and utterly unprepared for the storm that approaches with the inexorable certainty of desert winds. His dreams have not yet begun, but already the threads of destiny are weaving themselves around him with colors as brilliant and complex as his magnificent coat. Soon, very soon, the dreamer will dream, and nothing will ever be the same again. In the quiet hours before dawn, when darkness still clings to the hills of Canaan like a protective shroud, Joseph often finds himself awake and restless. Sleep, which comes so easily to his brothers, eludes him with increasing frequency. He lies on his simple mat, staring up at stars that seem to pulse with some unspoken message, their ancient light whispering secrets he cannot yet decode. There is a stirring in his spirit, a sense of anticipation that has no name, no clear source, no rational explanation. He is still a boy in many ways, yet something within him reaches toward mysteries that grown men fear to contemplate. When he walks among his father's flocks, he sometimes pauses mid-step, overcome by the strangest sensation that he stands on the threshold of something vast and incomprehensible. The feeling passes quickly, leaving only the familiar sight of sheep grazing and the ordinary sounds of pastoral life. But its echo lingers in his heart like the memory of a half-forgotten song. Joseph's humanity reveals itself most clearly in these private moments of uncertainty. Despite his father's unwavering love and the magnificent coat that marks him as chosen, he grapples with questions that have no easy answers. Why does he feel so different from his brothers? Why do his thoughts turn constantly toward futures he cannot envision and purposes he cannot name? Why does the very air around him seem charged with expectation when he has done nothing yet to warrant such cosmic attention? The weight of Jacob's favoritism begins to press upon him like a stone upon his chest. He loves his father deeply, treasures their private conversations and the pride that shines in Jacob's eyes when they speak of flocks and fields and the promises God made to Abraham. Yet he cannot ignore the way his brothers' faces harden when Jacob's hand rests upon his shoulder. cannot pretend he does not see the hurt that flickers across their features when their father's attention passes over them to settle upon him with unmistakable preference. Late at night, when the camp sleeps and only the crackling of dying fires breaks the silence, Joseph walks among the tents of his family and wonders at the strange isolation his privileged position creates. He is surrounded by brothers, yet increasingly alone. He is beloved by his father, yet burdened by the very love that should bring him joy. He wears the colors of royalty, yet feels the growing chill of separation from those who should be his closest companions. The teenage heart that beats within his chest carries all the universal longings of youth magnified by circumstances beyond his control. He wants to belong, to be accepted, to find his place among his brothers without the constant reminder of his special status. He wants to laugh with them without seeing calculation in their eyes, to work beside them without feeling the invisible barriers his father's preference has erected between them. Most of all, he wants to understand why he feels so profoundly different, why his spirit reaches toward horizons that seem to exist beyond the boundaries of ordinary human experience. In moments of brutal honesty, usually during those sleepless hours when truth cannot be avoided, Joseph acknowledges the fear that grows within him like a seed in fertile soil. He fears his brother's increasing coldness, fears the responsibility his father's love places upon his young shoulders, fears the strange stirring in his soul that suggests his life will demand more of him than he knows how to give. He fears most of all that he will prove unworthy of whatever purpose seems to hover just beyond his understanding. His prayers during this time carry the desperate intensity of a young man standing at the edge of transformation. "What do you want from me?" he whispers to the star-scattered sky, his voice barely audible above the night wind. "I am only a shepherd boy. I know nothing of the great things my father speaks of, nothing of the promises made to Abraham and Isaac. If you have chosen me for something, show me what it is. If not, let me simply be a son among sons, a brother among brothers." Yet even as he pleads for ordinary life, something deeper in his spirit rejects the possibility of remaining unchanged. He feels the stirring of gifts he cannot name, the awakening of perceptions that extend beyond the physical world into realms of meaning and symbol and divine communication. When he looks at his brothers now, he sometimes sees not just their faces, but glimpses of their inner natures, their hidden strengths and secret fears. When he observes the natural world around him, he perceives patterns and connections that others miss, as if creation itself speaks to him in a language older than words. The coat his father gave him becomes both blessing and burden, a tangible reminder of his set-apart status that he cannot remove without causing deep offense to Jacob. He wears it with increasing self-consciousness, aware of how it marks him as different, special, chosen. The beautiful colors that once filled him with simple joy now seem to announce his isolation to anyone who sees him approaching. He finds himself wishing in his moments that he could strip more difficult away both the coat and the favor it represents could somehow return to the uncomplicated brotherhood of his earlier years. But transformation once begun cannot be reversed by wishing. Joseph stands poised on the precipice of his destiny, still young enough to long for the safety of childhood, yet old enough to sense that safety is an illusion he must soon abandon. The boy who tends his father's sheep with growing skill and deepening wisdom does not yet know that he will soon be called to tend the welfare of nations. The teenager who struggles with his brother's resentment does not yet understand that he will one day hold their lives in his hands and choose mercy over vengeance. In these final days of innocence, Joseph embodies the beautiful contradiction of youth approaching its end. He is simultaneously eager for the future and terrified of it, ready for change and desperately clinging to the familiar, blessed with extraordinary potential, and burdened by the weight of expectations he does not fully comprehend. He stands in the doorway between childhood and destiny, between the known and the unknowable, between the boy he has always been and the man he is about to become. The dreams have not yet come, but already he feels their approach like distant thunder on a cloudless day. Something stirs in the depths of his sleep, some presence moving through the corridors of his unconscious mind, preparing visions that will reshape not only his own understanding, but the very foundation of his family's future. He wakes some mornings with fragments of images dancing at the edges of his memory, too fleeting to grasp, but too significant to dismiss entirely. Soon, very soon, the human boy will encounter the sacred in ways that will forever change the trajectory of his life and the destiny of generations yet unborn. But for now, in these precious final moments before transformation, he remains beautifully, achingly human, uncertain, hopeful, afraid, and utterly unprepared for the magnitude of what approaches with the inevitability of sunrise over the ancient hills of his homeland. The first signs arrive like whispers carried on desert winds, so subtle that Joseph almost dismisses them as products of an overactive imagination. It begins with the sheep, these familiar creatures whose movements and sounds have provided the soundtrack to his youth, begin responding to his presence in ways that puzzle even the most experienced shepherds in his father's employ. When Joseph approaches a scattered flock, they gather without his calling. When he walks among them, they follow with unusual devotion, their bleating creating harmonies that seem almost musical in their complexity. The old shepherds notice this phenomenon and speak of it in hushed tones around their evening fires. The animals know, they whisper to one another, their weathered faces creased with wonder and concern. They sense something about the boy that we cannot see. Some attribute it to natural talent, the gift that occasionally appears in those born to work with living creatures. Others, those whose memories stretch back to older stories and stranger times, suggest something deeper at work, something that touches the realm where heaven intersects with earth. Joseph himself feels these stirrings most acutely during the liminal hours when day surrenders to night, and the familiar world transforms into something mysterious and pregnant with possibility. As twilight deepens over the hills of Canaan, shadows seem to dance with purpose rather than following the random movement of wind through grass and trees. Stars appear in configurations that strike him as significant, though he cannot articulate why certain arrangements of celestial lights fill him with such profound anticipation. The dreams begin as fragments, fleeting images that dissolve upon waking like mist before the morning sun. He sees golden grain swaying in fields that stretch beyond the horizon, their movements synchronized as if responding to some unheard music. He glimpses celestial bodies in stately procession across midnight skies, their paths traced with silver fire that burns without consuming. He witnesses scenes of abundance and want, of elevation and humiliation, of separation and reunion, all painted in colors more vivid than any earthly palette could produce. These nocturnal visions leave him disoriented and strangely energized, as if his soul has traveled to distant realms while his body remained anchored to his sleeping mat. He wakes with the taste of otherworldly air in his lungs and the echo of voices speaking languages he does not recognize yet somehow understands. The boundary between sleep and waking begins to blur as elements from his dreams seep into his daily consciousness, creating a constant sense of existing simultaneously in two worlds. His perception of ordinary events takes on new depth and significance. When he observes his brothers working in the fields, he sees not just their physical labor, but glimpses patterns of relationship and hierarchy that seem to extend beyond their immediate family into realms of cosmic order. When his father speaks of the promises made to their forefathers, Joseph hears harmonics in Jacob's voice that resonate with frequencies beyond normal human hearing, as if ancient words carry power that transcends their literal meaning. The natural world around him becomes increasingly responsive to his emotional and spiritual state. On days when he feels particularly attuned to these mysterious stirrings, water springs run clearer, fruit trees bend their branches lower as if offering their bounty, and even wild creatures approach with unusual trust. Conversely, when he struggles against these changes in his perception, the environment seems to mirror his internal conflict. Clouds gather without apparent meteorological cause. Animals become skittish, and the very air feels charged with tension. His relationship with solitude deepens during this period of transition. While his brothers seem to require constant companionship and conversation, Joseph finds himself drawn to remote places where he can process these strange new aspects of his existence without distraction or judgment. He discovers hidden valleys where silence feels almost tangible, ancient groves where filtered sunlight creates natural cathedrals, springs that bubble up from unknown depths carrying water that tastes of minerals and mysteries. In these sacred spaces, Joseph begins to understand that his increasing isolation from his family serves a purpose beyond mere favoritism or adolescent awkwardness. He is being prepared for something that requires a different kind of strength, a different way of seeing, a different relationship with the divine forces that shape human destiny. The loneliness that once troubled him transforms into a necessary solitude, a crucible in which his emerging gifts can develop without interference from those who might not understand their significance. The coat his father gave him begins to feel less like mere clothing and more like a garment of transformation. When he wears it, the mysterious stirrings in his spirit intensify. Colors seem more saturated, sounds carry additional layers of meaning, and his dreams become more vivid and coherent. He begins to suspect that the coat itself serves as some kind of catalyst, a physical object that somehow amplifies his connection to the supernatural realm that increasingly calls to him. His brother's resentment, rather than diminishing with time, grows sharper and more focused. They sense the changes occurring in Joseph even when they cannot articulate what those changes entail. His growing otherworldliness sets him further apart from them, creating an invisible barrier that makes normal familial interaction increasingly difficult. They see him spacing out during conversations, responding to things they cannot perceive, carrying himself with a new kind of gravity that seems inappropriate for someone his age. Yet even as these supernatural elements enter his life with increasing frequency and intensity, Joseph remains fundamentally grounded in his humanity. He still experiences doubt, still wrestles with questions about his identity and purpose, still longs for acceptance from his brothers and guidance from his father. The mystery unfolding within and around him does not eliminate his human needs and vulnerabilities, but rather intensifies them, creating a dynamic tension between the earthly boy he has always been and the divinely touched young man he is becoming. The whispers grow stronger each day, preparing him for revelations that will soon crystallize into visions of such power and clarity that they will forever alter not only his own understanding of his place in the world, but also the trajectory of his entire family's future. Something approaches with the patience of eternity and the urgency of destiny. Something that will demand everything he has to give and transform him in ways he cannot yet imagine. The unknown calls to him across the threshold of transformation, and soon, very soon, he will have no choice but to answer. The night arrives without warning, though in retrospect it seems inevitable as the turning of seasons or the rising of tomorrow's sun. Joseph lies upon his simple mat, the magnificent coat folded carefully beside him, its colors muted but not diminished in the silver moonlight that filters through the tent walls. Sleep comes to him as it has increasingly often in recent weeks, not as peaceful rest, but as a gateway into realms that exist beyond the boundaries of ordinary experience. The first dream unfolds like a scroll written in symbols older than language itself. Joseph finds himself standing in a vast field that stretches beyond the horizon, its boundaries lost in morning mist and golden light. The earth beneath his feet pulses with life, rich and dark and pregnant with possibility. Around him, as far as his dreaming eyes can see, stand sheaves of grain, their heavy heads swaying in a breeze that carries whispers of ancient promises and future fulfillment. These are not ordinary sheaves, but living embodiments of human destiny, each one representing something profound and personal that his waking mind cannot yet comprehend. As he watches, mesmerized by their synchronized movement, his own sheaf begins to rise. It lifts itself from the earth with dignity and purpose, growing taller and more radiant than all the others, its golden grain catching light that seems to emanate from within rather than from any external source. The other sheaves respond to this elevation with movements that speak of recognition and reverence. They bow toward his rising sheaf, not in defeat or humiliation, but in acknowledgement of some cosmic order that transcends human understanding. The bowing is graceful, natural, as inevitable as rivers flowing toward the sea or flowers turning their faces toward the sun. In this moment, Joseph experiences not triumph, but a profound sense of responsibility, as if he witnesses not his elevation above others, but his calling to serve purposes greater than himself. The dream shifts and transforms with the fluid logic of visions that operate beyond the constraints of physical law. Now he stands beneath a night sky more magnificent than any earthly astronomer has ever witnessed. The stars burn with intensities that would blind mortal eyes, yet in this realm of dream and revelation, he perceives their glory without harm. The moon shines with silver fire that illuminates not just the landscape around him, but the very depths of his soul. As he watches in wonder, the celestial bodies begin their stately dance. The sun, though it is night, appears as a golden orb of such beauty and power that his dreaming heart nearly stops at the sight. 11 stars arrange themselves in a perfect arc across the heavens, each one unique in its radiance, each one familiar in ways that speak to bonds deeper than blood. The moon, luminous and graceful, completes this cosmic assembly with her gentle presence. Then comes the moment that will echo through eternity, the gesture that transforms a young shepherd's dream into prophecy that will reshape the destiny of nations. One by one, with movements that possess the gravity of ritual and the beauty of worship, these celestial bodies bow toward him. Not to him, he understands with startling clarity, but toward what he represents, toward the purpose that flows through him like a river of light connecting heaven and earth. The sun's bow sends waves of golden radiance rippling through the dream landscape. The moon's graceful inclination bathes everything in silver benediction. The 11 stars trace arcs of fire across the sky as they acknowledge the mysterious role he is destined to play in the unfolding of divine purpose. Joseph stands at the center of this cosmic drama, feeling simultaneously infinitely small and impossibly significant, a single human being chosen to serve as a conduit for forces that govern the movement of history itself. When he awakens, the dreams do not fade as ordinary nighttime visions do. Instead, they burn in his memory with crystalline clarity, each detail preserved as if carved into stone by divine hand. The sensations linger in his body, the feeling of grain-heavy earth beneath his feet, the weight of starlight on his shoulders, the profound sense of purpose that filled his dreaming soul. He sits up on his mat, his heart racing not with fear but with awe at what he has experienced. The tent around him feels simultaneously familiar and foreign, as if he has returned from a journey to distant countries where different laws govern reality and different truths shape existence. The coat beside him seems to shimmer with residual energy from the visions, its colors more vivid than he remembered, its patterns somehow more meaningful and significant. When he touches the fabric, he feels a tingling sensation, as if the garment itself has been transformed by his encounter with the divine realm. Dawn approaches with unusual beauty, painting the sky in hues that echo the colors of his dreams. As Joseph emerges from his tent, he carries within him not just the memory of visions, but a fundamental alteration in his understanding of his place in the world. He is no longer simply Jacob's favored son, or a shepherd boy marked by an extraordinary coat. He has become a vessel for purposes that extend far beyond his individual existence, a human being chosen to serve as a bridge between the divine will and earthly fulfillment. The weight of this revelation settles upon him like a mantle, both glorious and terrible. He understands with the intuitive knowledge that comes only through direct divine communication that his dreams are not mere products of an active imagination, but prophecies that will reshape the destiny of his family and the nations that will spring from their lineage. The responsibility of carrying such knowledge fills him with emotions too complex for his 17-year-old heart to fully process. Yet even as he grapples with the magnitude of what has been revealed to him, Joseph feels a deep sense of rightness about the visions. They confirm the stirrings he has felt in his spirit, the sense of destiny that has been growing within him like a seed in fertile soil. The dreams do not feel foreign or imposed, but rather like the revelation of truths that have always existed within him, waiting for the proper moment to emerge into consciousness. As he walks among his father's flocks that morning, the familiar landscape seems transformed by his nocturnal encounter with the divine. Every blade of grass speaks of growth and purpose. Every stream whispers of divine provision. Every cloud formation hints at the vast orchestration of events that shapes human destiny. He sees his brothers approaching in the distance, and his heart both soars with love and aches with the knowledge of how these visions will affect their relationships. The dreams have marked him as surely as his father's coat, setting him apart in ways that go far deeper than mere favoritism or special privilege. He carries within him now the burden and blessing of divine revelation, the weight of knowing truths that others cannot yet perceive, the responsibility of living in alignment with purposes that transcend personal desires and human understanding. Joseph stands at the threshold between his old life and his destiny, between the familiar world of shepherding and the mysterious realm of divine service. The boy who went to sleep the night before was already marked as different, but the young man who awakens carries within him visions that will echo through generations, dreams that will guide the preservation of nations, and a calling that will transform not only his own existence but the very foundation of human history. The encounter beyond words has begun its work of transformation, and there can be no returning to the simplicity of his former existence. Morning light filters through the tent walls like liquid gold, but Joseph barely notices its beauty. He sits in stunned silence, his hands pressed against his temples as if he could somehow contain the vastness of what has been revealed to him. The dreams pulse in his memory with undiminished intensity, their symbolic language gradually translating itself into understanding that both exhilarates and terrifies his young heart. He is 17 years old, a shepherd boy whose greatest responsibility until yesterday was ensuring his father's flocks found adequate pasture and clean water. Now he carries within him visions that speak of destiny on a scale that makes his mind reel with vertigo. The sheaves bowing in recognition, the celestial bodies acknowledging his role in some cosmic drama yet to unfold, the profound sense of purpose that filled his dreaming soul. All of it points toward a future so far removed from his current existence that he can barely comprehend its implications. How does one prepare for a calling that transcends every boundary of ordinary human experience? The weight of divine selection presses upon him like a physical force, making each breath feel deliberate and significant. He understands now why the stirrings in his spirit have been growing stronger, why the natural world responds to his presence with increasing sensitivity, why solitude has become not just preferable but necessary. He is being prepared for something that will require every aspect of his being, his mind, his heart, his will, his very soul, to be aligned with purposes that extend far beyond personal ambition or family loyalty. Yet the boy within him rebels against the magnitude of what has been revealed. He wants to run to his father's tent and pour out everything he has experienced, to seek Jacob's wisdom and guidance in understanding these overwhelming visions. But something deeper than conscious thought warns him that this knowledge cannot be shared carelessly. That divine revelation carries responsibilities that include knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. The dreams belong not just to him, but to the future they foretell, and their timing must be guided by wisdom greater than his own. As he tends his father's flocks that morning, Joseph finds himself studying his brothers with new eyes. In the dream, their sheaves bowed to his, not in humiliation, but in acknowledgement of some role he is destined to play in their lives. The celestial vision suggests an even broader scope of influence, with his parents and brothers all somehow connected to the purpose that will flow through his existence. The knowledge fills him with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread, for he loves his family deeply and cannot imagine circumstances that would place him in a position of authority over those he has always looked up to. The practical implications of his calling remain frustratingly unclear. The dreams speak in symbols and metaphors, revealing the what but not the how, the destination but not the path. Joseph finds himself caught between the certainty of divine purpose and the uncertainty of human implementation. He knows he has been chosen for something significant, but he has no idea how that choosing will manifest in the concrete realities of daily life. His relationship with his magnificent coat takes on new dimensions as he processes the meaning of his visions. The garment no longer feels like mere favoritism from his father, but rather like a prophetic symbol, a physical representation of the spiritual reality that sets him apart. When he wears it, he feels connected not just to Jacob's love, but to the divine purpose that flows through his bloodline, linking him to Abraham's call, Isaac's blessing, and Jacob's wrestling with the angel of the Lord. The isolation he has increasingly felt from his brothers now reveals itself as necessary preparation rather than unfortunate circumstance. Divine calling, he begins to understand, requires a willingness to stand apart from conventional expectations and relationships. The very visions that have been revealed to him will likely deepen the divide between him and his siblings, for how can they understand or accept dreams that place him in positions of authority over them? Yet, even as Joseph grapples with these overwhelming revelations, his fundamental humanity remains unchanged. He still experiences doubt, still wrestles with questions about his worthiness for such a calling, still longs for normalcy and acceptance from those he loves. The divine touch upon his life does not eliminate his human needs and vulnerabilities, but rather intensifies them, creating a dynamic tension between the earthly boy he has always been and the prophetic figure he is apparently destined to become. In quiet moments, when he is alone with his thoughts and the gentle sounds of grazing sheep, Joseph attempts to reconcile the extraordinary nature of his visions with the ordinary circumstances of his current existence. He is still his father's son, still a keeper of flocks, still a young man learning the skills necessary for survival in an ancient world. Yet he now carries within him knowledge of a destiny that will somehow elevate him to positions of influence he cannot currently imagine. The responsibility of carrying such knowledge weighs heavily upon his young shoulders. He feels the burden of representing not just himself, but the divine will that has chosen to work through his life. Every decision now carries additional weight, every action potential prophetic significance. The freedom of childhood, already constrained by his father's favoritism and his brother's resentment, now disappears entirely as he begins to understand that his life belongs not to himself, but to purposes greater than individual desire. Prayer becomes his refuge during this period of overwhelming adjustment. In the quiet hours before dawn and after sunset, Joseph seeks divine guidance for understanding and wisdom for navigating the complex realities of his calling. His prayers carry the desperate intensity of a young man standing at the edge of transformation, pleading for strength to bear what has been placed upon him and wisdom to fulfill what has been required of him. The dreams continue to surface in his consciousness throughout his waking hours, their symbolic language gradually revealing additional layers of meaning. He begins to perceive connections between his visions and the stories his father has told him about their family's history, the promises made to Abraham about becoming a great nation, the blessings pronounced upon Isaac and Jacob. His personal destiny appears to be intricately woven into the larger tapestry of divine purpose that has been unfolding through his lineage for generations. As days pass and the reality of his calling settles more deeply into his understanding, Joseph feels a growing sense of urgency about sharing what has been revealed to him. The visions seem to demand witness, to require acknowledgement from others who will be affected by their fulfillment. Yet he struggles with how to communicate experiences that transcend ordinary language and understanding. How to convey the certainty he feels about his divine calling without appearing arrogant or delusional. The impossible mission that has been entrusted to him remains largely mysterious in its practical implementation, but its spiritual reality burns within him with increasing intensity. Joseph stands poised at the threshold of a destiny that will reshape not only his own existence but the future of nations, carrying within his 17-year-old heart the weight of divine purpose and the burden of prophetic knowledge that will soon transform every relationship and circumstance in his world. The morning when Joseph finally speaks his dreams aloud dawns with deceptive tranquility, as if the very heavens hold their breath before the storm that will reshape his family forever. He has carried the visions within him for days, their weight growing heavier with each passing hour until silence becomes more unbearable than the risk of revelation. As his brothers gather around the familiar circle where they share their morning meal, Joseph feels the words rising in his throat like water from a deep well, inevitable and impossible to contain. "I have had a dream," he begins, his young voice carrying across the circle with innocent enthusiasm that betrays no awareness of the devastation these words will unleash. The brothers look up from their bread and milk, their expressions ranging from mild curiosity to barely concealed irritation. They have grown accustomed to Joseph's otherworldly moments, his tendency to speak of things that seem to exist beyond the boundaries of their shared reality. But something in his tone this morning suggests this will be different. Joseph's eyes shine with the inner light of one who has glimpsed divine truth as he describes the field of sheaves, the inexplicable rising of his own bundle of grain, the graceful bowing of all the others in acknowledgement of some cosmic order. His words paint vivid pictures of golden wheat swaying in supernatural breezes, of earth that pulses with life and purpose, of a hierarchy established not by human ambition but by divine decree. The silence that follows his account carries the weight of thunder before lightning strikes. Reuben, the eldest, feels his face flush with indignation that begins as a slow burn and quickly becomes a raging fire. Simeon and Levi exchange glances heavy with shared outrage, their warrior hearts recognizing the challenge implicit in their youngest brother's vision. Judah, natural leader among them, struggles to maintain the diplomatic composure that has always marked his character. But even his patience has limits. "Do you indeed think you will reign over us?" Reuben's voice carries the accumulated frustration of years spent watching his birthright diminished by their father's obvious favoritism. "Do you think you will have dominion over us?" The questions hang in the air like drawn swords, sharp with resentment and disbelief. How dare this pampered boy, this wearer of multicolored coats, suggest that he will someday command their obedience and reverence? But Joseph, carried away by the intensity of his visions and the burning need to share what has been revealed to him, cannot stop. The second dream pours from his lips with even greater fervor, his words painting pictures of cosmic drama that unfold across the star-scattered canvas of night sky. He speaks of the sun and moon and 11 stars, of celestial bodies acknowledging his role in some divine plan that transcends earthly understanding, of purposes so vast that even the heavens themselves participate in their fulfillment. This second revelation proves too much for hearts already strained to breaking by jealousy and wounded pride. The brothers erupt in voices raised not just in anger but in something approaching horror. Their youngest sibling, the one who has already monopolized their father's affection and worn his favoritism like a crown, now claims dominion not just over them but over their parents as well. The audacity is breathtaking, the arrogance unbearable. Even Jacob, when Joseph eagerly shares his visions with his beloved father, responds with sharp rebuke that surprises them all. "What is this dream that you have dreamed?" the patriarch demands, his voice carrying uncharacteristic sternness. "Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" The old man's reaction stems not from lack of faith in divine communication, but from wisdom earned through decades of navigating the complex dynamics of family relationships and the dangerous waters of prophetic revelation. Yet even as Jacob rebukes his son publicly, something in the old man's heart recognizes the authentic ring of divine communication in Joseph's words. He has wrestled with angels, has heard the voice of the Almighty speaking promises that seemed impossible when first uttered, has lived long enough to see divine purposes unfold in ways that confound human understanding. Though he silences Joseph's enthusiasm, he quietly ponders these dreams in his heart, sensing currents of destiny that flow beneath the surface of immediate family drama. The brothers, however, possess no such spiritual discernment or restraint. Joseph's dreams become like salt in wounds that have festered for years, intensifying their resentment until it transforms into something darker and more dangerous. They see in his visions not divine revelation but insufferable arrogance, not prophetic insight but the delusions of a spoiled child who believes himself deserving of worship from those who should be his equals. Their conversations, when Joseph is not present to hear, take on tones of increasing bitterness and barely concealed violence. They speak in whispers around evening fires of their brother's insufferable presumption, of the way their father's favoritism has corrupted his character, of the need for someone to humble this dreamer before his arrogance destroys what remains of their family's harmony. The beautiful coat that once merely symbolized preferential treatment now represents everything they despise about their current circumstances. Joseph, caught up in the intensity of his divine encounters and the urgency of sharing what has been revealed to him, remains largely oblivious to the growing storm his revelations have unleashed. He interprets his brother's hostility as temporary resistance to truths they will eventually accept, never imagining that his words have planted seeds of hatred that will soon bear fruit more bitter than anything he could conceive in his youthful innocence. The household that once functioned with the normal tensions and rivalries of any large family now operates under the shadow of division that threatens to tear apart bonds forged by blood and history. Meals become exercises in barely maintained civility, work assignments sources of additional friction, casual interactions charged with undercurrents of resentment and rage. Joseph's presence transforms from blessing to burden, his very existence a constant reminder of inequities that have grown beyond their ability to tolerate. As days pass and the initial shock of Joseph's revelation settles into chronic irritation, the brothers begin to organize their resistance around shared grievances and mutual support. They find comfort in each other's company and validation in their collective rejection of their youngest siblings' presumptuous claims. What begins as individual resentment gradually crystallizes into group consensus that something must be done to address the impossible situation their brothers' dreams have created. The age of resistance has begun, and its momentum builds with the inexorable force of an avalanche gathering snow as it descends toward valleys below. Joseph stands at the center of a storm he helped create but cannot control, his divine visions having set in motion human dynamics that will soon demand far more of him than he ever imagined possible. The boy who dreamed of sheaves and stars is about to discover that the path from vision to fulfillment leads through territories of darkness and suffering that his youthful optimism could never have anticipated. The pit opens beneath Joseph's feet like the mouth of the earth itself, swallowing not just his body but everything he believed about family, love, and the nature of divine promises. One moment he stands in sunlight, calling out to brothers he has sought across miles of wilderness, his voice carrying the innocent joy of reunion across the empty spaces of the desert. The next moment, rough hands seize him from behind, and the magnificent coat that marked him as chosen becomes a shroud of betrayal as it is torn from his shoulders with violence that speaks of years of accumulated hatred finally given permission to act. The physical darkness of the cistern mirrors the spiritual darkness that descends upon his soul as he lies broken at the bottom of what feels like his own premature grave. Above him, filtered through the narrow opening that represents the only connection between his current reality and the world he has lost, he hears the voices of his brothers discussing his fate with the casual indifference of merchants negotiating the price of livestock. The boy who dreamed of sheaves bowing in reverence now listens to his own siblings debating whether to kill him outright or sell him to passing traders like unwanted cargo. In this moment of ultimate betrayal, something profound shifts within Joseph's understanding of what it means to be chosen by divine purposes. The visions that once filled him with wonder and anticipation now seem like cruel mockery. Their promise of elevation transformed into a guarantee of suffering that his young mind struggles to comprehend. How can dreams of cosmic significance coexist with the harsh reality of abandonment in a hole carved from stone and despair? How can divine favor manifest as human rejection of the most brutal and personal kind? The cistern becomes a classroom where Joseph receives education in truths that cannot be learned through ordinary experience. Stripped of his beautiful coat, separated from his father's love, abandoned by brothers who should have protected him with their lives, he discovers dimensions of human nature that his sheltered existence could never have revealed. The boy who knew only preference and privilege now encounters the raw reality of hatred, envy, and the capacity for evil that exists within hearts he thought he understood completely. Yet even in this darkness, something within Joseph refuses to surrender to despair. The dreams that brought him to this place continue to pulse in his memory with undiminished clarity, their symbolic power unaffected by his current circumstances. As he lies in the darkness, surrounded by walls that seem to close in with each passing hour, he begins to perceive that his vision spoke not of easy triumph, but of a destiny that would be forged through fire and tested in ways that would strip away everything superficial about his faith and character. The hours stretch into eternity as Joseph wrestles with questions that have no simple answers. Why would divine revelation lead to such immediate and devastating consequences? What purpose could possibly be served by this transformation from beloved son to discarded victim? How can he maintain faith in promises that seem to have been withdrawn the moment they were most needed? The physical discomfort of his imprisonment pales beside the spiritual agony of trying to reconcile his visions with his current reality. Above him, the business of betrayal continues with efficiency that reveals how long his brothers have contemplated this moment. He hears the approach of the Ishmaelite caravan, the jingling of bells on camel harnesses that announces the arrival of traders who will become unwitting instruments in the fulfillment of purposes they cannot imagine. The sound grows louder, accompanied by voices speaking in tongues that represent not just foreign languages, but alien destinies that will soon become his own. When the rope descends into the cistern and rough hands pull him toward the light, Joseph experiences a rebirth that is simultaneously salvation and condemnation. He emerges from the pit like one rising from the dead, blinking in sunlight that reveals a world fundamentally altered from the one he knew before his descent into darkness. His brothers avoid his eyes as silver coins change hands, their faces masks that hide whatever remnants of conscience might still stir within their hearts. The moment when chains are placed around his wrists marks the death of Joseph the dreamer and the birth of Joseph the slave, though he does not yet understand the profound transformation occurring within the depths of his being. The boy who once walked freely among his father's flocks now stumbles forward in bonds that represent far more than physical restraint. He is being separated not just from his family and homeland, but from every assumption about how divine purposes unfold in human history. As the caravan begins its journey toward Egypt, Joseph looks back once at the land of his birth, the hills where he tended sheep and received visions that seemed to promise nothing but glory and elevation. The irony is not lost on him that his path toward the fulfillment of his dreams apparently leads through territories of suffering he never imagined existed. The visions that spoke of authority and reverence now guide him towards slavery and anonymity in a foreign land whose gods and customs represent everything his upbringing taught him to reject. The rhythmic swaying of the camel beneath him creates a hypnotic cadence that allows his mind to process the magnitude of what has occurred. In the space of a few hours, he has been transformed from favorite son to human merchandise, from dreamer of cosmic visions to property to be bought and sold according to the whims of traders who see nothing in him but potential profit. Yet beneath the shock and grief and disorientation, something deeper stirs in his spirit. A recognition that this apparent catastrophe might serve purposes too complex for his current understanding to grasp. The other slaves in the caravan eye him with mixtures of curiosity and pity, recognizing in his fine features and soft hands someone unaccustomed to the harsh realities of bondage. Their whispered conversations, conducted in languages he does not understand, create a soundtrack of alienation that emphasizes his separation from everything familiar and comforting. He is alone in ways that go far beyond physical isolation, cut off from the very foundations of identity and belonging that have shaped his existence from birth. As night falls over the desert and the caravan makes camp under stars that once seemed to promise his elevation, Joseph lies bound and guarded like any other piece of valuable cargo. The celestial bodies that featured in his vision of cosmic acknowledgement now look down upon him with what seems like indifference, their light offering no comfort or explanation for the dramatic reversal his life has taken. The boy who dreamed of stars bowing before him now stares up at them from the position of one who has lost everything except the mysterious visions that brought him to this place. In the depths of that dark night, as he listens to the sounds of a world that has no place for him, Joseph begins to understand that his dream spoke not of destinations, but of journeys. Not of positions, but of processes. not of immediate fulfillment, but of preparation for purposes that require more of him than he ever imagined possible. The visions that once seemed like promises of easy triumph now reveal themselves as invitations to participate in divine purposes so vast and complex that their fulfillment demands the complete transformation of everyone involved. The darkness that surrounds him is not empty but pregnant with possibilities he cannot yet perceive. In losing everything he thought defined him, Joseph begins to discover who he really is beneath the layers of privilege and preference that have shaped his identity. The slave who emerges from this night of the soul will be fundamentally different from the dreamer who entered it, though the visions that guide his destiny remain unchanged in their essential truth and power. Years pass like pages torn from a book of suffering, each one marked by lessons that no palace education could provide, and wisdom that emerges only from the crucible of absolute dependence upon divine grace. The Hebrew boy who once wore colors of royalty now dresses in the simple garments of a prisoner. Yet something within him has been refined to a brilliance that makes his external circumstances irrelevant to his truest identity. In the depths of Pharaoh's prison, surrounded by the forgotten and the condemned, Joseph has discovered resources of strength and purpose that transform even the most hopeless situations into opportunities for divine service. The prison becomes his university, its stone walls the boundaries of a classroom where he learns to read the hearts of men and interpret the language of dreams with accuracy that astounds even the most hardened criminals. Fellow prisoners seek him out not for entertainment but for insight, drawn by something in his presence that speaks of connection to powers beyond human manipulation or control. When the chief cupbearer and chief baker share their troubling nocturnal visions, they approach Joseph with the desperate hope of men who recognize authentic spiritual authority when they encounter it. The interpretation of dreams, which once brought him mockery and betrayal from his own brothers, now becomes the key that will unlock doors leading to destinies beyond imagination. As Joseph explains the meaning of the cupbearer's vision of restoration and the baker's prophecy of execution, he speaks not with the arrogance of youth, but with the quiet confidence of one who has learned to distinguish between personal ambition and divine revelation. His accuracy in these interpretations establishes his reputation as more than merely another prisoner, but as someone through whom supernatural wisdom flows with unmistakable authenticity. Yet even this recognition comes with its own form of suffering, for the cupbearer, restored to his position exactly as Joseph predicted, forgets his promise to mention the Hebrew interpreter to Pharaoh. 2 more years pass in the darkness of forgotten cells, while Joseph waits with the patience of one who has learned that divine timing operates according to principles that transcend human urgency or convenience. The delay serves not as punishment but as final preparation, allowing the young man to develop the spiritual maturity necessary for the responsibilities that await him. When Pharaoh's dreams finally shatter the sleep of Egypt's most powerful ruler, the stage is set for the most dramatic reversal of fortune in human history. The king's visions of fat and lean cattle, of full and withered grain, carry implications that terrify even the most experienced counselors in his court. Egypt's magicians and wise men, masters of their ancient arts, find themselves confronted with symbols that resist every attempt at conventional interpretation. In their failure lies the opportunity for divine wisdom to demonstrate its superiority over human learning and earthly power. When the prison doors finally swing open and Joseph stands before Pharaoh, something profound occurs that transcends the mere elevation of a slave to power. The Hebrew dreamer, now 30 years old, has been transformed by suffering into an instrument of divine purpose so refined that his personal story becomes inseparable from the destiny of nations. As he interprets the king's visions with wisdom that flows from sources beyond human learning, Joseph fulfills not just ancient dreams but reveals the hidden architecture of how providence works through human hearts, prepared by trials too severe for ordinary understanding. The boy who once spoke of sheaves bowing in recognition now commands the resources of the ancient world's greatest civilization. Yet he wears his authority with the humility of one who knows that power serves purposes larger than personal ambition. In saving Egypt from famine, he preserves the very brothers who betrayed him, demonstrating that divine love operates according to principles that transform even the cruelest betrayals into instruments of redemption that echo through generations yet unborn. Joseph's story lives on because it reveals truths about the human condition that time cannot diminish, that our greatest sufferings often prepare us for our most significant contributions, that the very people who wound us most deeply may depend upon us for their salvation, and that divine purposes unfold through paths so unexpected that only faith can navigate their mysterious turns toward ultimate meaning and restoration.